rarely do we get to a point where we say, hold on, why are we doing this? Is this in alignment with what we want to do? And so part of transformation, and we'll talk about that, is realizing that status quo plays a part. And then actually saying, okay, well, is this where we want to be, or do we want to be somewhere different?
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 114 of Toward a Better Life, the podcast featuring like-minded people sharing stories, ideas, and activities on what we can do to generate a better life individually and collectively. You know, you've heard me say that so much over the past few years, but in today's world, there truly is a need to seek balance, harmony, compassion, kindness on so many levels, personally, culturally, spiritually, to name a few, but and that's a big but. It begins with each of us individually. That's what I like to share on this podcast from around the world, seeking others of the same spirit, heart, and mind. This is a platform, a school, if you will, a venue to begin and continue that journey to wholeness and harmony. I also offer the opportunity for you to share your prose, your music, your poetry, and storytelling on the show. Please subscribe to it, and if you haven't done so already, through your favorite podcast platform, do so today. And keep following for weekly magical insights into earth-based spirituality, self-development, self-care. Also, remember to support the show by leaving your review on Apple Podcasts. Please visit my website at towardabetterlife.com and check out the events page while you're there for details where you can join me at my upcoming workshop, Ancestral Healing, Becoming a Hollow Bone. That's coming this April to Maine, and there are a few spots still left. Send all your inquiries to me, Kevin, at towardabetterlife.com. In this episode, I'm going to welcome Dan Storey, a behavioral scientist on a mission to help people get unstuck from the status quo and make better decisions that move them toward a more fulfilling life. In this week's episode, we're exploring thoughts like, there are no unique messages, only unique messengers. And motivation, well, that fades quickly. Discipline, that's what keeps you going. As an author, trainer, and motivational speaker, Dan works with teams and individuals who want to overcome burnout, rediscover their passion and purpose, and generally re-engage with life and work. So let's get on with it, shall we? Join Dan Storey and I as we discuss personal transformation versus status quo. I want to welcome Dan Storey, who's a behavioral scientist on a mission to help people get unstuck. And he was from England about up until August. Now he's in New York. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Kevin. Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for warming the place up a little bit. It's a little chilly here. If you listen to this, it's kind of, I'm still in Celsius or centigrade or whatever, so I'm still in kind of like the zero territory. That's actually minus, but you guys, I'm slowly coming over to the US systems.
Yeah, well, it kind of dates us when this actually comes out, because this morning I got up to the very, very warm temperature Fahrenheit of 4 degrees in North Carolina.
There you go. So that's why we're wearing the nice woolly jumpers today.
Yeah, that's why I saw something this morning kind of humorous on social media. They said the trick is if you really want to combat the cold, what you do is you put enough layers on so you can't get out the door.
That's the solution. That's the solution. There we go.
So everybody, Dan has got some really good thoughts about personal transformation and things of that nature, and he has a book out, the Personal Transformation Blueprint. Is that the name for it?
That's it. That was as catchy as I could get it.
Well, I think that does a good job. It's concise and it's very, very catchy. So I want to kind of move that direction, but Dan, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's just kind of see where it goes and talking about your book.
Yeah, so I've been in the psychology space for, well, let's say 20 years.
Okay.
We won't ask any more questions after that.
Okay.
And it started off with a friend of mine. I was into fitness and training people, and he handed me a CD. He said, hey, you're working with clients, I think you might like this. And he introduced me to this concept of NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming. I started to use that with some of my clients, play around with their headspace a little bit. And I found the results I could get with that kind of mirrored the the running around and the fitness work, but I didn't have to get cold and sweaty. Um, and I actually really enjoyed it. I liked, the psychology space. I studied this NLP concept some more, went into teaching it, in fact, in business context, and then spent a long time in teaching psychology to salespeople. There's a huge amount of psychology in communication, questioning,
Mm.
understanding, influencing. We can use the word manipulating if you want. It
Hmm.
depends who you're playing with. Um, but a lot of that is linguistics and playing around with people's thought processes. So huge amount of application of psychology in and across business. And then, a few years ago, I thought, oh, I should probably get some more certificates because, we're always chasing those things.
Sure.
And if you're working with salespeople, the natural opposite of that is understanding the client a little bit more and what they're trying to achieve and understanding their thought processes. So I studied for a master's degree in behavioral decision science. So how do people make decisions? Why do we make decisions we do? And then ultimately, how can we play around and influence it? So yeah, for the past, I don't know how many years is just playing around with psychology. The big thing, and you mentioned it there at the beginning, is so many people get stuck. We get stuck in loops and patterns, and one day we wake up, and typically this is people in between 30 and 50. I don't want to call it middle age. I don't know how long age goes now. It depends, how long we want to stretch it.
Yeah, it's
But
relative.
we get to a point in life where we realize that we've made some good decisions, but we've also made a lot of decisions that aren't necessarily in our best interests. And when we reflect on those, we kind of end up in this life where we're like, oh, is this where I want to be?
Hmm.
And and that's kind of a lot of the work that I do is people coming to me and say, hey, I feel like I'm okay. In the book, I call about this trap of average. I've been successful, but I'm not necessarily fulfilled. So it's kind of figuring out how do we get to that point, and then ultimately how do we get out of it as well.
Yeah. So can you explain a little bit further about NLP for us and our listeners? Because I'm a little familiar with it, but just in 200 words or less.
Oh wow, it's like one of those old school assignments. So I think
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can. So if you think about NLP, it's a language for explaining how we do certain things. It was designed by a linguist and a computer programmer. And effectively, they looked at people who are experts at what they did and said, can we decode that? Can we break it down? So how do people get into rapport? How do we change
Mm.
people's thoughts? How do we have a conversation at what different levels? And at the time, there was no real description for it or no language for it. So they said, okay, well, let's look at it and let's break it down into its component parts and let's build a process. So neurolinguistic programming, if you think about those three elements, neuro, to do with the brain and how we think, linguistic, how we use language to change various bits and pieces, both internally and externally. And then programming, the idea that there's a sequence of what we do and that we have a thought, an action, and that leads to an outcome. So neurolinguistic programming is how do we use all of those three components to change our thoughts, to change the language we use, and ultimately create different results.
So can that be used? I know that before we started recording, we're talking about all different avenues and venues that can be used. And I'm going to say it can probably be used as well, even in our personal behavior and our personal life and transformation, can it not?
Yeah, it absolutely can. I mean, one of the main reasons why I studied it at the beginning was thinking, okay, well, why do I do certain things? And, why
Hmm.
do I make terrible decisions? And we can look inside and we can understand how are we motivated, for example. So
Right.
inside we're motivated by our values. They align with our identity, but we're motivated by our values. And the values are kind of like these driving forces. So let's say my value is, and I'll use health and fitness just because I've been to the gym this morning. But
Hmm.
health and fitness, I'll have certain beliefs around what health and fitness are. But if I'm driven by health and fitness, then I'll do things. My calendar will reflect it. My spending habits will reflect it. How I spend my time will reflect that that's a value of mine. The beliefs, how I think about it, will determine what I do. So a value is kind of like the engine, a belief's the steering wheel. And so two people could be motivated by the same thing. Let's say we're both motivated by ambition. Your ambition and beliefs around that could be different to mine. So we could both have the same drive, but we could go in completely different directions. And
Okay.
so really what NLP does and psychology does and a lot of the formulas and models in psychology, it says, okay, well, how do we take a complex situation, break it down, and then really understand why we do it and then rebuild it if we're going in the wrong direction. So if you're not motivated by the right things or if you don't steer in the right direction, how do we play around with that and help you make better decisions and choices?
I know that in a lot of the studies that I look at and some of the areas of interest that I've got is the magic word is intention. I have an intention that when I'm working with somebody in body work, I'll just give this as an example. And if I have somebody on the table, and the term that we like to use a lot is they're helping,
Mm.
using air quotes. And basically, that just means they're engaging their muscles to help me massage. And that's the worst thing in the world to do. If you're ever thinking about getting a massage, anybody that's listening, don't help the massage therapist. Just lie there and take it. Because when you engage the muscle, it makes it more difficult to manipulate that muscle. So I have to change the intention. And typically, I'm going to put you on the spot, Dan. If you were on the table getting a massage, what do you suppose you would do if I said, "It's okay, Dan, relax"? What do you
I,
suppose you're going to do?
I'm falling asleep. Like
Okay.
I used to think of this as a terrible thing, but actually now I think it's the biggest compliment possible is that I want to just
Oh, yeah.
as much as I can fall asleep and let the person do
Okay.
the work. Like
So a
I'm
lot of
okay to
time,
turn it over to you. You're the expert.
so a lot of times what people will automatically do when I ask them to relax, they'll actually tense up,
Mm,
which is
yep.
interesting.
Yeah.
But if I just say to them, let go,
Yep.
there's your
Right.
linguistic part.
Yeah.
And they don't know how to respond to that, so they do.
Yeah, but think about that. It's visualization. We know what letting
Hmm.
go is, like mentally and physically and energetically. We know what that is. To relax, I have to think about that. And actually, in the thought process, and this, we come into hypnosis, right? Hypnosis
Hmm.
says if you want to relax and go in a trance, a higher state, we use more abstract language. If we want people to focus, concentrate, i.e., tense up, we use more precise language. So the more abstract you can be, the more people will naturally kind of zone out. So yeah,
Hmm.
perfect example.
Yeah. And can you see where NLP would work hand in hand with some of this as well?
Oh yeah, we used to do hypnosis as one of the things, and one of the kind of the parlor tricks of hypnosis is those getting people to lie between two chairs, right? And so how do you get people to see the exact opposite? But how do you get people to tense their muscles so tightly that they can just be stiff and rigid like a board? It's
Yep.
fun.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. So it's amazing, right? It's amazing that there, and we all know there's this body-mind connection.
Yes.
We talk about it, but rarely do we use it. And it's interesting. I mentioned intention yesterday in my newsletter. Is Intention is the opposite of status quo. So status quo says, it's let's say I've got it's 11:22 now. Let's say I've got 11:30 client. I'm running a little bit late for the session or something like that. And what am I doing? Typically, I'm on my phone. I'm checking emails. I'm checking messages. I've got a WhatsApp. I've got to reply to very quickly. I come into the session. Okay, we're going to do the same thing as last time, and we just go through the process. Right? Status quo says we don't think, we just act. And
Mm,
if we act, we do what we did yesterday and what we did the day before. And
right.
status quo bias is the biggest challenge in sales, in psychology, everything. Everything is geared towards maintaining the status quo because we don't like change. And
Mm,
what you're saying is with intention, it's saying, how can we break status quo? Or at least question it, or at least challenge it. Say, do I want to show up like this?
yeah.
And my argument for you on the intention side is, and it's going to be different from a massage thing, but how can I be intentional about my approach, not the outcome? We
Right.
can rarely can we approach, rarely can we control the outcome, but we can be intentional about our approach. If I was going into a session like that, my focus is going to be, my intention is to be to educate, or my intention is going to be to change my language or something along those lines. So intention is huge because it's the first step to breaking status quo.
Yeah. The intention that I usually share when I teach this stuff is I say that, your intention when you walk through that door and your person, guest, patient is on the table,
Yep.
you leave everything outside the door.
Mhm.
I don't care what it is. And if you cannot do that, then you need to do something else for the
Mhm.
day or for a
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
because you are completely devoted to that individual. That's my intention,
Yep.
is that my intent is focused on that totally and completely on that person. Thanks for this, by the way, Dan. What do I owe you? Because this is actually going to be a workshop I'm reteaching in about 6 weeks.
Steal as much as you can. I'm sure I've stolen it from other people. I do try and give credit where credit is due, but
Yeah, yeah.
we're just
So
recycling, right?
yeah, yeah, recycling. That's it. Go with that. So I think this also goes hand in hand with your book, the
Mm.
personal transformation blueprint, because part
Yeah.
of transformation is to change the status quo, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Status quo, like I said, status quo is the biggest thing that I fight against. As a salesperson, I always ask this, if you're selling something, who's your biggest competitor? And, salespeople always say, oh, it's this company or it's this product or something along those lines. And actually, the reality is it's status quo. Most deals, I think it's something like 60, 70, could even be up to 80%. Most deals don't go to a competitor, they go to no change. So, for
Hmm.
example, I go out to buy something, and my favorite ones are you ever go and buy an appliance or
Oh
something, you're
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
and you kind of look at it and you're looking at the thing and you're like, I know I need to buy something, but I don't know anything about these things. What does 400 watts mean? I don't know. So I'm completely naive. Somebody comes up and says, can I help you? And you're like, oh, freak tax as a salesperson. And what do? You don't say, yeah, I'd love some help. Can you advise me? It's like, no, I'm fine. Thanks. And we try and muscle through these decisions. We can't make the decision. We get scared of making the wrong decision. So in the end, we would just make no decision and say, okay, everything will be fine. And
Hmm.
that's the same in business, right? So status quo is the biggest one. All of the psychological research on this, by the way, is being done by economists and marketers. So that tells you the interest in kind of the wider world of breaking status quo. It's to get you to buy things and take action and invest and spend your money somewhere. But it's something that we need to be aware of, and that we'll go through life. What day is it today? It's Wednesday. Wednesday is a little bit like Tuesday, which is a lot like Monday. And we can often wake up and we'll go through days and days and days and have done the same thing just because maybe all of our life is already planned. Our calendars are full. We have a routine. So, I have a little girl now. So I know, today is after school club, and we're doing Lion King today. And I know that because it's the same as last week and the week before. Rarely do we get to a point where we say, hold on, why are we doing this? Is this in alignment with what we want to do? And so part of transformation, and we'll talk about that, is realizing that status quo plays a part and then actually saying, okay, well, is this where we want to be, or do we want to be somewhere different?
Hmm. And that is it. Where do I want to be?
Yeah.
Where do I want to be? And the classic thing that I've run into in other situations, and we've all heard it, where are you going to be in 5 years?
Yeah.
Or where
Yeah.
would you like to be in 5 years?
Yeah.
Or and it's like, well, really, I really want to do this, 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 and this. Well, that's great, but you do understand that in order to accomplish those things, you need to do something magical, which
Yeah.
is change,
Change. Exactly. And
probably.
it's not even that we need to change. This is the problem with change, right? Everybody knows that we need to do something different. So we just had New Year's resolutions come in. I'm going to eat healthier. I'm going to call my family a little bit more often. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do all these things, right?
Uh-huh.
We have all these little things that we think we're going
Uh-huh.
to do. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to change outside stuff. We're trying to change those things over there. That I can control. That's on my calendar, those things. And we don't make the internal changes
Right.
that we need to make. So it's easy to do these behaviors, right? It's easy to eat healthy. But after all, like eating healthy sucks. Like I'm a bodybuilder. I have to eat healthy for a period of like 3 months at a time without anything interesting going into my body. That's boring. Like, and I don't blame people for giving up after 2 weeks. To be fair, I would do it
Yeah.
unless it's attached to something.
Mm.
Unless it's attached to something. And so this is where most people need to think. It's like this idea of 5 years, 10 years, or wherever it's going to be, is how do we have a vision for our
Hmm.
life? Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? I'd really like to do this, or I'm okay over here. But that says a couple of things. Number one, I'm not happy where I am.
Mm.
Right? Number
Okay.
one, it says I'm not happy where I am. Now, Kevin, you've probably got a pretty good life, right? Things are going all right. There's certain areas you're happy with. There's always other areas, and we're not completely satisfied. But a lot of people, they'll get to that point and they'll say, oh, okay, well, I'd like more for my life. And then they feel guilty for wanting more. They're like, oh, well, things aren't too bad. Other people have it worse. So we actually kind of downplay our motivation. The other side of that is we say we want more for our life, but then we get angry because we haven't got it. Or we get
Mm.
angry because other people have got it. Have you
Mm.
ever met those people where they're just, oh, these
Oh
things
yeah.
happen and those people made these things, and that's the reason why I don't have what I have.
Uh-huh.
And so when we have this element of dissatisfaction, we often have to kind of balance two feelings. One is that anger and drive and like just resentment with a feeling of gratitude. And oftentimes they'll cancel each other out. They'll cancel each other out, right? And so these people are like, well, I should do it, but I don't need to. And okay, so I won't do anything. And this is what I call the trap of average. We're not happy quite where we are, but we're also not kind of unhappy enough to make it change. And we look at these, people who go from rags to riches, for example. They've got nothing. Of course, they're motivated. I'm in a very comfortable position. Why should I change? And so this is a really interesting piece, is we need to be able to hold that dissatisfaction without it burning us up and aspire to doing something a little bit more with our life.
So is that one of the three mental shifts that I see that's written
Yeah.
before me is maybe overcoming the trap of average?
Yeah. And changing our, or leveling up our expectation. So
Hmm.
what do I want to achieve with life? I came out of university and I had some goals. I remember this now because my mum's here. We're kind of doing the old flashbacks thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go and do this. I actually accomplished that relatively quickly. I wanted to go and work at fitness. I achieved that goal and I kind of get there. And then you're like, oh, is that
Now
it?
what?
Yeah, right. And so, it's okay to set goals and further up, but like, what do we do? Here's another thing from psychology is we have this concept of anchoring. So let's say, you know, I've gone to school, and my family have gone to school or something, and they've only ever gone to kind of the college level, or like in England we call it college. Here it would be high school. For you to want to go above that is difficult. This is why we kind of typically stay in the lanes. But imagine you're the first kid in your family to go to college. What
Hmm.
does that mean? What does that mean? And there's stuff pulling you back. There's mental stuff pulling you back. We've got to be able to break out of that. We've got to dream. We've got to have ambition. But we've also got to realize that we're anchored in place. And so we often only ever move, a fraction from where we are. So my bodybuilding, for example, I'd always been fit, but I'd never seen myself as a bodybuilder. That was miles away. And I had
Yeah.
to have a complete change of my mindset to even believe that's possible. Now, it wasn't going to happen in a day or a month or a week. And so we often think too short term. But could I do it in 5 years? Well, yeah, probably. I did. So by the way, flash forward, it all turns out okay. But then there's other things, right? So right now I'm a writer. I've written one book. I've got another book coming out. Do I see myself as a writer yet? No, not quite. But I've set that as the target. That's the kind of 3, 4, 5 year target. I know what that's going to look like. I have goals along the way to keep myself motivated. But that's the expectation transformation. I've got to think differently about myself.
Okay. So thinking differently about yourself, and that's getting out of the trap of average. Is that what I'm guessing?
Yeah. And for
Yeah.
me, it was, the trigger for me to write this one was it was a photo. I saw myself on the beach and I had very average, I'm dad, so I had a dad bod. I had an average job, average income, average a lot of things. And a lot of people would say, okay, that's good. You've done well, but I wasn't satisfied. I wasn't challenging myself. I wasn't growing. I wasn't pushing myself to see what else I was capable of. I was just sitting there going, okay, well, let's just carry on and we'll do the same thing tomorrow. And one of my personal beliefs is that we should see what we've got and challenge ourselves and try and reach the edge and play around with that. I've done it in the past. That was the thing. I'd done it in the past, but what I saw in that photo was somebody who hadn't done it. And it was telling all the old stories. And I'm like, no, I need some new stories.
Yeah. Is that the number two? Is that challenge yourself? Is that number two of the
Nah,
group? No, no.
it, the number two comes with challenge. Okay, so here we go. So I remember saying this. I said, all right, I'm going to be a bodybuilder. I'm going to be a bodybuilder. By the way, bodybuilding is easy and fitness goals are easy. That's why most people from a transformation perspective choose fitness as the first one because there's no other people. It's,
Uh-huh.
you haven't got to deal with other people. It's just me, the gym, the kitchen, and those kind of things. So it's very much something that we can control. But what number two is, it's mental toughness. And it says as soon as we set a goal for ourselves that's significant, there's going to be this separation of our identity. So today, I know who I am. If I look in the mirror, I am the result of all the choices I've made, the decisions I've made, my history, my experience, all of those things. That's who I see in the mirror. Who I want to be, I don't have reference for that. I know who I
Hmm.
am. I know what I'm good at. I know, my skills and talents, but I don't have reference for that person. And yet, if I want to be that person, I have to act as if. So if I'm going to be a bodybuilder, I have to go and do the workouts. I have to go and eat the food. I have to, do all of those kind of things. If I want to be a writer, I have to show up and I have to type. If I want to be a salesperson, I have to make the calls. And these are things that I'm not necessarily good at and I'm
Hmm.
not necessarily confident at. And I don't have the experience to say that's who I am. I remember doing I was a sales trainer at the time, and I went and did a guest presentation at a big conference, and I thought I'd do the intro, and I'm like, oh, here's my experience, and I've trained at this company, and I wrote this book on sales, and all of these things where it's the old me. And then I put this picture up and said, oh, I want to be a bodybuilder as well. I didn't say that. I said, I am a bodybuilder. And I remember saying it and going, in my head, no, you're not, Dan. Who are you trying to lie to? And this is what our brain does. Our brain says, you don't have that. It's this imposter syndrome, this, you're a
Yeah.
fraud, you're a fake. And what we need to do, so step number two is we need to accept that that's going to come and do it anyway. Like this is what discipline is. Discipline is showing up. And people talk about motivation, say, "Oh, I'm excited, I'm going to do this thing," but motivation fades very quickly. Discipline is what keeps you going. And so I remember at times, especially on the bodybuilding journey, where I would go to the gym in the morning before, getting my daughter ready for school or whatever. I train at 4:30 in the morning. It's a ridiculous time, but that's what it took because all the rest of my time was taken. So, and I remember this. I videoed my feet just walking along the dark pavement going towards the gym, thinking one day, this is what discipline is. This is what showing up is. Do I want to go to the gym at 4 in the morning? No, I do not. Nobody wants to go to the gym at that time of day. Do I do it because it's attached to who I want to be? Yes. And so it's keeping that in mind and keeping that new identity in mind. So like now, for example, when I'm writing my book, do I want to write? No. Do I have my imposter syndrome kick in saying, Dan, you are a terrible writer all the time? So what do? Well, I know what I'd like to do. I'd like to distract myself and go and tidy the kitchen or go and make another cup of coffee or something. But no, I try and force myself to go through the process because I know that if I keep doing that, I'm going to get better. And this is what a lot of people don't do. They don't like that discomfort. They don't like that feeling of not being comfortable, especially when we get to say, 40 years old, I've got an element of success in my life. I've done pretty well. What do you mean I need to go and be terrible at something? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this thing over here that even though I'm not happy, I'm good at it. And so this is where we get stuck. So the second part is this idea of mindset transformation, where we have to go through this identity change, where we see ourselves as this person now because that's who we have the confirmation in our life. We see that person in the mirror, but we've got to hold that other identity long enough in our mind until we act as if. And it's interesting that there's a time when it crosses over. There's a time where one day you wake up and you actually feel a little bit like that new person. And I remember it as a bodybuilder, I'd get up every morning and I'd go downstairs and I'd weigh myself and, you're looking at scales don't change every day. And you look in the mirror and you're like, I look the same as yesterday. And then I remember one morning going downstairs and just kind of glancing up and seeing in the mirror this body. And I'm like, who's that? And I'm like, whoa. And every other morning it'd been, oh, here we go again. But I don't know what it was, just that. Now, some people will be thinking it's 50% of the journey. It's not. It's never 50%. It's much closer to 90%. It's towards the end where you actually have those confirmation pieces where you're like, oh, okay, maybe I can do it. And so it'd be nice if it was the other way around.
So it's a lot of the transformation process is, and you've used some key terms in this, some very specific terms like, showing up, discipline, things of that nature, keeping on, regardless of whether and a lot of it has to do, of course, like as well with the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
If I see myself as a podcaster,
yeah,
then do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if in my own eyes or somebody else's eyes, I'm good or not good, do it.
Yeah.
Until you can't.
I know. And so let's go with the podcast, right? And again, this is the same with the books. And, I've been podcasting now for a little while. And at the beginning, and I've spoken to people about this, and they're like, yeah, but, everything's already been said. And, what am I going to bring to the table? And, justification, I'm not going to do it, but, I want to, but and we have all of these things. And so we've got to learn to reframe that and think about it slightly differently. This is another kind of psychology term and an NLP term. It's a reframe. And one of the phrases I love, and steal this one if you want, is there's no unique messages, only unique messengers.
Mm-hmm.
And
that, yeah.
Yeah. And that for me was so impactful because I've read books and I've listened to things that I have and have not connected with. And I know there are people out there that need to hear certain messages that I can deliver. And maybe they're waiting for someone to say it in the way that I make it, or I say that message. And they haven't connected with it before. Maybe there's some kind of weird Britishness of somebody who's moved to America who likes to talk about bodybuilding and has this psychology background and drinks too much coffee that is just going to connect with that one person. And that's, that's why I do it. So, yeah, do I say a lot of the things that have been said? Yes. But do we need to hear it multiple times in multiple different formats? Yes.
Yes. So and I've said that several times here on this podcast over the years that I've been doing this.
Yeah.
Because some people will say, well, isn't that the same message you've had before? Yeah.
Yeah.
And how many times do you need to hear it before you really get it?
Yeah.
Or maybe you haven't really, I'm going to use air quotes, heard it yet.
Yep.
You think you have, but it hasn't really hit home.
Yeah.
And then Dan comes on and tells his side of the story, and for whatever reason, it clicks
Yep.
and you get it and you say, wow, I never
Yeah.
noticed that before. I can make a transformation. I can make a change. I can, exude mental toughness and really move forward with this because I've never heard it presented that way
Exactly.
because, you know, Dan is Dan, but Dan is a unique messenger.
Yep.
It doesn't mean he's not as good or better or anything. It's just that Dan has his own piece and its own approach towards
Yep.
something. And,
Exactly.
this applies everybody, and stop me, Dan, but this applies to everybody. This
Yeah.
applies to, name the occupation. How many car salesmen are there out there? We've mentioned about
Yeah.
salesmen a few times. How many are,
Exactly.
and how
And
many
there's
times?
no right way of doing it.
That's
Yeah.
right. There is no right way of doing it. If you try to go by the book, it ain't going to work.
Yeah.
I bought a new car the other day. I bought it. I went there with every intention of not buying a car. Dan, I was not going to buy that car. I was just going to go look at it. I was just
Yeah.
going to, and I get that. I've done this stuff.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you really want to know the truth of the matter, if anybody's out buying a car, I know what this podcast is about, but one of the easiest things to do is go in with the attitude that you're not going to buy the car.
Yeah. Anytime, just leave your credit card at home. I always say, leave your credit card at home.
Yeah.
But here's what a good salesperson do. I say, okay, well, Kevin, you're looking at a car. How long have you been thinking about this? Because the job of a salesperson, you have to do it with a smile, because otherwise it's a bit cheeky. But the job of a salesperson is not to make a sale; it's to make you to make a decision, a
Right.
yes or no decision, not a
Yes.
maybe. Maybe doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help a salesperson. Doesn't help you. You go out and you're still thinking about it. It's like, do I want to buy a car? Yes or no. Do I want to buy a car of this brand? Yes or no. Okay, great. Two decisions. And if they're both yes, let's go. Let's go and talk about what it is.
Yeah.
Stop umming and ahhing. It doesn't help. Like you're just going to waste mental energy. Life is too hard to waste mental energy on saying, should I buy a car? Should I not? Should I do this? We've got
Yeah.
far too much stuff to do.
And so the same thing would apply to writing a book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You go in, you can't write a book. You've never written a book. You're no good at writing a book. Why
Yeah,
would you write a book? And these are all the things that are going on in your head, all the lies that are going on in your head. And you just say, you know what? I really don't care what you think because in
yeah,
my mindset, in my new mindset, I am a writer.
yeah.
And it's going to
Exactly.
take me a lot of times. It's going to take me a lot of rejections from publishers. But doggone it, I am going to write because
Exactly.
I really want to write.
And
And
it's that
until,
I am status, that I am statement that you said there. I am. And
yeah,
it's really difficult to say that with integrity, to say I am something that I am not yet. Before I did my first bodybuilding show, I felt like a fraud every time I said it. And yet I remind myself that Muhammad Ali said it and he was all right. He said, I am the greatest before he even stepped in the ring. Like it
yeah.
was this kind of idea. So if it was good enough for Ali, then it's good enough for me.
And the other piece is with this number two is show up.
Yeah.
I remember that, in karate days in martial arts, that they said the essence of what they say is karateka, and that is showing up,
Hmm. Yep.
whether you feel like it or not. And it's the same way. And I've been to the gym, and sometimes, yeah, and even I go downstairs and I work on the elliptical, and sometimes I'll go down there, and I got to tell you the truth, Dan, there are days I really don't want to go,
Yep.
but I
Exactly.
go.
So I'm saying, like, I was chatting to a girl in the gym this morning. She's got a competition coming up. It's a really big competition in 6 weeks. And, she was saying, oh, I just don't feel like it. I said, you look like you're lifting angry today. And she's like, I just don't feel like it. Like nothing's going well. And I said to her, I said, it's a rule of thirds. One third of your workouts are going to be amazing. They're going to be the best workout ever. One third of them are going to be, no, that was okay. That was a decent workout. And one third are going to feel like work. It's going to feel hard. Nothing's going to connect. But you show up anyway
Yeah.
because you just don't know which third those are, and you're just grateful that you went. And it's still a step forward. It's still a step forward.
And there's just something that just keeps prodding me on to say it because we're talking about sales, we're talking about writing, we're talking about it, so we're talking about, I'm going to say, enterprise to some
Mm,
degree, and
yep.
and business life and things like that. Do you ever stop to think that maybe the same thing even applies to stuff like I've tried to meditate and I can't
100%.
because
Yeah.
I just don't know how.
Yeah.
Well, you begin by showing up.
Yep.
And
But also think about that. Like when we say I want to be a meditator, but you're not, Dan, because your brain is overactive. Meditators are always calm and always they're just always on this other plane of just mental existence where just everything. No, they're not. Like we have all these false
that's
beliefs. Like that's not the case.
yeah, that's the lie.
Yeah.
Well, if I can't set up in monk's robes and I can't be quiet for an hour and a half, then I'm not
Yeah.
a meditator.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so much, mental BS.
Exactly. It's funny, right? But again, all of this stuff is in our head.
Yeah, it
And
is.
but it only shows up when we say that we want to do something. This is the
So
thing.
what?
What we're sitting here, like just not trying to do anything, we're fine. But as soon as we put a goal out there, then all these things come in.
So is it a fear of change that makes our brain self-sabotage like this, Dan?
There's a fear of change. There's a fear. We have fear of embarrassment and fear of rejection and fear of doing something wrong and people laughing at us. I've got a 5-year-old daughter at the moment. She just doesn't care. Like I had a video of her doing this dance routine the other day. It was hilarious. Some of the moves were on the beat. Some of them were all over the place. As a grown up, I'm like, there's no way I'm doing that in front of my friend. That's going to go on the internet and they're going to get thousands of the wrong kind of comments. And so, a lot of people, what they do is, they'll try something new and they'll try and do it in secret. And if, it kind of goes well for a bit, but as soon as it gets hard, then we're like, oh, I hope nobody watched because I don't want to be, that's embarrassing. And then we just kind of shrink back. So we've got to be a little less ego. This is the thing, ego has to go a little bit out the window. And we just got to be okay with being a novice or a rookie again, which is, like I said, if we're doing it at kind of 30, 40, 50 years old, where we've had some success, to go back into that novice status is really, I don't know, it plays on the ego. Yeah, but I'm successful. I'm this. Not here, you're not. It's a different context. And so many people can't deal with that ego just comes in. So, for example, in the gym, when I'm lifting, I'm pretty good shape at the moment. I'm pretty strong, but I'm not the strongest. I don't want to be the strong. I'm not trying to be the strongest. But you see people going in there and they're looking around like, look how much weight I can lift. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't need to do that. And yet competition kicks in. You think, oh, I'll try and do a little bit more than that person. And then we lose it because we're focusing on outside stimulus as opposed to inside.
Bingo.
So yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons why we don't move forwards, or we
So we've
try
got to
and never go back.
so we've got to the trap of average, and we've got some mental toughness figured in here,
Yeah.
side by side with some of our mindset transformation. What's a third mental shift we need to look at, Dan?
So the last one, and I call it work rate transformation.
Okay.
We've got to think about how we work. Now, as a kid, I used to think I was intelligent, right? Now I'm older and I realize that I was just naive. But I thought, right, I'm smart. I've got some certificates, I've got some, things that I can do. I'm going to think my way through problems. Yeah, I'm going to figure out a way so I don't have to go that way. I'm going to go around it or I'm going to go past it or anything like that. I tried to find shortcuts and everything I could do, which is why, working with sales was quite good because the salespeople always look for the shortcut. After a while, you go realize there is no shortcut. There is only the work.
Mm-hmm.
And, you can't, in the gym, for example, you can't outsource some of the things you can do. You have to go and do your own press ups. But that doesn't mean you have to just keep doing it. You just kind of just keep plodding on. You've got to be a bit smarter than that. So we can work smart. And work smart says, okay, well, once I've figured something out, how can I be more efficient or more effective? Um, but you still got to work out what it is. So if we kind of come into business, for example, let's say I want to outsource my marketing. Like it's a good thing, right? As I'm a small business owner, I don't have enough time. I want to outsource my marketing. Well, you're going to pay. And this
Mm-hmm.
is the thing. And you're either going to pay in time or money. And this is the thing. And so if you know what you're talking about and you kind of be very specific and say, okay, well, this is what I want, this is what I need, this is the thing, these are the metrics, if you can really articulate what it is you need, you won't pay as much, but you've put in the time. If you don't know how to say that, you're going to pay in money because you're asking for that experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so this is, there's a great book called The E-Myth, revisited by a guy called Michael Gerber. This is one of the kind of ones about systematizing business so you can scale and move beyond. You've got to go through the process before you know how to outsource it. So a lot of people will, from a diet perspective, from bodybuilding, is they'll buy these meal plans, but then, oh, why is my food not working? So, well, you're eating the right thing, but you're also eating that, you're eating that. You haven't educated yourself. So we still got to work smart. The other thing that most people get wrong, and this is with work, is the idea that, and I'll use a bodybuilding joke, is that we can have our cake and eat it.
Hmm.
There are times when I can eat cake. It's not all year round. So there is a component of sacrifice involved. And this is what people don't understand. They think sacrifice, everyone hears, the term diet. And if we think sacrifice, we think goats and virgins, right? You just throw some things into the volcano and appease the gods or whatever. Um, but sacrifice isn't like that. Sacrifice is more, I don't play chess, but this concept of in chess, you sacrifice a pawn to gain an advantage on the board.
Yep.
And so sacrifice for me is about giving things up, not so that I don't have as many things in my life, but so that the things I have in my life, I can invest more into. And so that's it. So bodybuilding for me is a lifestyle choice. It means that there are certain things I cannot or do not do, especially around bodybuilding, but it means that I get so much more out of a smaller number of areas. And so I think one thing that people do is they go too thinly across the board and they never reach success or depth or traction with any of these things because they don't put in enough effort and enough time because they're trying to do too many things. So, if you're going to do something and you think it's something that you really want to do, is invest in it. Find a way to free up time or free up energy or free up resources or something along those lines so that you can do more of it. And I think there was a line by, I think Jim Carrey, and he says, if you're not willing to sacrifice the quality of your life for a year to get everything that you want, then you don't want it enough, or something along those lines. And
That sounds like it.
yeah,
Uh, it
it's just
sounds, there were some other things that Jim Carrey said that, and everybody thinks of Jim Carrey as that person that is just, he's out there, he's a comedian, he's a funny
yeah,
guy, and they think of, the detective stuff, and yet Jim Carrey himself is quite a different
yeah,
person
mm,
from what you can tell.
yeah,
But what you've touched on with number three is one of the primary statements of any martial artist. And you ask them, what is the secret to martial arts? Do you
hmm.
know what the secret to martial arts is?
Is it practicing one kick 1,000 times?
That's very close because my sensei would say the secret of martial arts is practice, practice,
Yeah,
practice.
yeah,
If you want to be a writer, practice,
hmm,
practice,
yeah,
practice. If you want to do a meditator, practice,
yeah,
anything. And I read something not too long ago. They said that, if you want to read all the books, and I'll go back to Druidry, if you want to read all the books on Druidry and all the books on, just incredible, mind-blowing spirituality stuff, that's great. But until you put it into practice, it's
yep,
just words.
yeah,
It's when you
exactly.
put this stuff into practice that it becomes magical.
Yep,
You didn't really get the real feel of being a bodybuilder until you actually did it. You can read all the books you want. I can read all the books I want on Tai
yeah,
Chi, Qigong,
yeah,
karate. I can get all the videos I want, but unless I really practice it, I'm just lip service. That's all it
yeah,
is.
exactly. I used to be a teacher. This was a long time ago after I came out of uni. And I went to work with sports people for it. And then I went back to university, and I had a gap where I actually
Mhm.
worked with sports people and athletes and people and training them. And then I went back and taught principles of strength and conditioning. And that time gave me a difference in the way I taught. Everybody else who came straight out of school and then went straight into teaching did this. They kind of picked up a book and then they read from the book. I did the same, but then I put the book down and I talk from here, or I talk from here, and said, okay, well, it's like now, right? I could talk to people about discipline and making good choices, and say, okay, well, to be disciplined, you need this, this, and this. But I couldn't say how it feels,
Yeah.
or I couldn't say the questions that go in behind your head, and I couldn't connect on a deeper, real level
Yep.
if you haven't been there. I'm
Yep.
not saying that, I'm still a teacher every day, but I want to challenge myself. I want to challenge to get the experiences that allow me to be a better teacher. And that was one of the reasons why I took the bodybuilding. Yes, did I want a physical challenge? Yes. But did I want to be a better teacher? Did I want to understand psychology more? 100%. And that was my chosen vehicle. I've chosen a couple of other vehicles now, and I'm challenging myself in those areas. So, we'll keep putting the transformation blueprint to use. But yeah, let's have some experiences. Let's live this life. That's what we've got to do.
Yeah. Toward a better life. Nice segue. Um, so Personal Transformation Blueprint is that the title of your book for sure?
Yeah, that's the one. That's on Amazon. It's got a little picture of a goldfish. This idea that, we're happy in our little pond, but we should try and get out and live in a bigger pond sometimes.
There you go. There you go. And how do people go about getting this book?
This one's on Amazon. So,
Okay.
talk about working smart. There's no way as much as I love you guys, then there's no way I'm packing it up and shipping it out to you. The mailman wouldn't be able to read my handwriting anyway. So we're going to let Amazon take care of that. So anywhere Amazon is, you can grab it there.
There you
And
go.
hopefully we should have the audiobook out this year as
Oh,
well.
good. Good.
Yeah, I need to get on that.
Um, and do you do some personal work with folks, one-on-one stuff with folks? If you
Yeah.
do, tell us shortly about that part of the
Yeah.
work that you do.
So there's two pieces of coaching that I do. I either do the personal transformation work, so people have a specific goal they want to get over and they want to stick with it long enough to achieve those outcomes. So we definitely do some of that. The other one I do is on mental toughness specifically. So I've studied mental toughness. There's a scientific model with 8 different components. And so it covers things like resilience, goal focus, persistence, these kind of aspects, growth mindset. It allows people just to kind of make overall changes. So I typically work with managers, senior leaders within organizations, sales leaders, those kind of people who want to, really and understand that life is a challenge mentally, and they want to equip themselves with a few more tools and resources to deal with that.
Is that your other book that's coming out? Is on mental toughness?
It's the third book is on mental toughness. So, like I said, I got a picture, right? 5-year plan. So, second one, and then these were both getting written at the same time, but I felt called to write the stuck one first, or unstuck. So, yeah, there's a book called Bulletproof Mindset coming out. That'll be later this year. But the beginning of the year, we're writing the book Unstuck. Because if you
Okay.
think about what the challenge is from personal transformation, first step is always the hardest. And how do we get to that point, like I said at the beginning, where we can break the status quo, where we think about things differently, where we can be more intentional? I think if we're honest with ourselves, we all know what we need to do. But getting to that point where we say, okay, I'm going to do it, that I think is the hardest. That's the hardest step for most people is that first step. Say, okay, let's go do it.
So we have the a couple of books that are available right now. Is that correct?
The we go back in time. There's a sales book written by me about neurolinguistic programming. That's a whole different kettle of fish. But
Yeah.
right now in the series, Personal Transformation Blueprint is the first one. Unstuck will be coming out first half of the year. That's my commitment.
Okay.
And then the Bulletproof Mindset one will be later in
Yeah.
the year. Yeah.
Okay.
The
Good.
plan's there. The plan's there. Now I just got to work the plan, show up every day with discipline, overcome that, Dan, you're a terrible writer mindset that kicks in almost every time. And like I said, then I've got to go to work. So I've got to put in as much work in the writing as I do in all the other areas of my life as well.
And website.
Danstorey.com. So DANSTOREY.com. And if people are interested, I've got a newsletter as well. It's called Pep Talk. So it's a coaching thing, but it's on purpose, energy, and productivity. So if we can keep those three ideas in our mind, purpose, energy, and productivity, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the right things? Do we have energy and vitality that we can chase after our goals? And are we doing things every day and contributing meaningfully? If we keep those three concepts in our mind, then I think we're on track.
Good. What does Dan do to create a better life for himself? I know you got a
Uh,
daughter, and that creates a lot.
it's amazing. I'm challenging myself constantly. So I have the bodybuilding challenge, which is really interesting. It's always a comfort zone breaker.
Hmm.
Last year I ended up at the Natural Olympia, which is the world championship from a bodybuilding perspective. So, and I'll tell you this, I was about to go on stage. It was me and 5 other guys in the final of the heat. And I looked around, I'm like, oh man, I'm surrounded by giants, quite literally and physically. And even at that point, when you've been putting in so much work, imposter syndrome comes in, but you've got to realize that most cases we deserve to be there. Whether you've got the experience or not, we deserve to be there. So I'm going to challenge myself ongoing from a fitness perspective. I'm challenging myself as a dad to raise a phenomenal daughter, or is she challenging me as a dad? I haven't quite figured that out yet. It depends on which day of the week, but she's our motivation changes. Right? We talked about values earlier. Our motivation changes when the little thing comes into the world. So I'm trying to do as much as I can. And this first book was dedicated to her so that we don't have to transform. We can live life that's more in line with our values and our motivations without kind of going with what society says and get stuck in those situations anyway. So a lot of the writing I'm doing is to make sure that she sees that we don't need to kind of conform and do what other people expect us to do. And then, yeah, it's just, for me, it's making sure that I don't get stuck and that I do continue to live the life. And so that is challenging. And so sometimes I wake up and I feel like, oh, can't I do something a bit easier? Yeah, there are moments. But then, like you said earlier, there's no unique messages, only a unique messenger. I need to continue to be the messenger.
There you go. Any other thoughts you want to share with the listeners before we go?
No, I think the only one that I really want to share is this idea of status quo. Is that, and so I'll give you one little tidbit. So we talked about status quo. The reason we don't change is this principle called the region beta paradox, is that we know that what we need to do. We know that we need to change, and yet we're able to say, not yet, or we're able to kind of push the limit from where it's enough to not enough. And, so if we think about when does a job become quittable? Like, we can deal with a lot of stuff, but something has to happen for us to say, right, I'm going to quit my job, or I'm going to quit this relationship, or I'm going to give up alcohol, or something along those lines. But that element is flexible, and it's purely in our mind. Say, okay, well, if this happens, then I'm going to quit. And most people are very good at pushing that away. No matter how close we get, we're able to push it away. And so when it comes to status quo, I would just say, okay, well, look at those things, look at those barriers, the limits that you place on it, look how flexible they are. And if you don't like it, then instead of pushing it away, why don't we bring it in and challenge ourselves to make more changes? Because change isn't a bad thing, it's scary, we don't always know what's on the other side, but like I said earlier, if we focus on the process and how we approach things and let go of the outcome, I think we'll all be a little bit happier.
Excellent. This has been an eye-opener, Dan. Thanks so much for sharing your time. And everyone, be sure to keep your eyes out and go check out on Amazon Personal Transformation Blueprint. And Dan Storey, thanks so much for being a guest today on Toward a Better Life.
It's been a pleasure, Kevin. Thanks for having me on, and hope the listeners get some good ideas from this.
Thank you, Dan, for helping us explore personal transformation. You can contact Dan Storey through his website, danstorey.com, to unleash your true potential and live the life at a level, well, that you only dreamed possible before. There's a link in the show notes to connect with Dan. And don't forget, if you're seeking insights and advice on how to create a better life for yourself, and if you'd like to dive into self-care, self-development, or distance shamanic work, drop me a line. And that's for a free discovery call. You can also visit my website, towardabetterlife.com, for past episodes, blog entries, ways to enhance your spiritual journey, and a few products to assist you on that journey. And be sure to check out the events page, everybody, for details where you may join me at an upcoming workshop, Ancestral Healing, Becoming a Hollow Bone. That's just weeks away, by the way. It's coming this April to Maine, and there are still some seats available. Send all your inquiries to me, kevin@towardabetterlife.com. And please subscribe to the program. That's through your favorite podcast platform, of course. And do leave your review on Apple Podcasts. It takes a minute, and it helps immensely to spread the word about the program. If you have any questions, or if you'd like to share your story, music, prose, and if it's an audio file, just send it to me as an MP3. And if you'd like to be my guest, just write to me, kevin@towardabetterlife.com. Until next week, enjoy your journey toward a better life.